Hey y'all, I am back with another chapter of Will Smith's book entitled Will. Chapter 4, Power. Paul was in trouble. He was getting into fights, staying out late, sneaking to New York from his home in Jersey to hang with the wrong crowds. I heard my mom say he'd even knocked out a cop. He was 18 years old, and my Aunt Barbara couldn't handle him anymore. Desperate, she called the one person she knew who could help, Daddy-O. It had been a few years since any of us had seen my cousin Paul. We all remembered him as a sweet but serious kid. But when he showed up in Philly in the summer of 1983, he was a grown-ass man. Paul was tall now. His shoulders were broad, and he was shredded. This dude was a brick. The knuckles on his hands had scratches and cuts and keloid scars that he clearly did not get from cooking. He sported a huge afro with a Black Power fist pick stuck in the top. But his pick was the special edition that had the peace sign cut out of the wrist handle. And if that didn't get your attention, Paul also went everywhere with an attack-trained German Shepherd named Duke. Paul had recently achieved his first-degree black belt in Kung Fu and proudly walked around West Philly dressed in his G and Kung Fu slippers. He was full on into his militant Black Power phase. He was like the no bullshit real-life version of Bruce Leroy from the movie The Last Dragon. Paul never said much, but when he did speak, he was unfailingly polite. He would karate bow all the time and end every sentence with either a yes, sir, or a no, ma'am. He stayed to himself and he didn't bother anybody. But if you fucked with him and he snapped, 2 words, scorched earth. By the time Daddy-O's business, ACRAC, which stood for air conditioning, refrigeration, air compressors, was popping, it had expanded and morphed beyond just refrigeration repair. Now, where the father's business comes in, his air conditioning and refrigeration business, you can see that with Leo on the 4th and the sun being conjoined to Uranus, especially with it being in Virgo, that's maintenance, that's repairs. So Uranus rules refrigeration, air conditioning, air compressors, things like that. It had expanded and morphed beyond just refrigeration repair. When he would sell his clients new refrigeration equipment, they would often pay him just to get the old ones out of their stores. His shop became a sort of graveyard for refrigerators and ice machines, but instead of sending them to the junkyard, Daddy-O would work day and night to refurbish and rebuild them. So the refurbishing and rebuilding is represented when you see this Pluto influence. So Uranus can join to Pluto. Before he knew it, he had the capacity to produce thousands of pounds of ice each day from machines that had been thrown away as trash. And just like that, our family was now in the cubed ice business, manufacturing, packaging, and delivering bags of ice throughout Philadelphia, into Jersey, and even as far as Delaware. The problem was that bagging thousands of pounds of ice each day required labor, a lot of labor. And because ice is cheap, you need the labor to be cheap. It started with me and Harry and Ellen and both my sisters, Pam, and then all of our friends. And then Daddy-O started recruiting extended family and all of their friends. Child labor laws were very different back in the day. So pretty soon, every kid in the neighborhood was bagging ice. ACRAC was the way kids stayed off the street and made a little money for the summer. Daddy-O had become a kind of kid whisperer in Winfield. Because he was so military minded, he was instilling structure and discipline to the level that most of these kids had never experienced. And he paid cash. If a kid was late, he sent them home. If someone cursed or fought, they were out. The kids' parents loved it. Their kids were earning cash money and learning respect and discipline. Daddy-O was in his lane. So when Paul started getting into trouble, my Aunt Barbara shipped him to Philly, hoping that the structure and cash of Daddy-O's ice house would change his life's trajectory. But it was my trajectory that would end up being changed forever. Paul moved in with us in late May, just in time for the summer ice rush. He had me walk him around the neighborhood. I showed him where Mr. Bryant's was, and I introduced him to my friends. I was showing off my cool ass cousin. Paul loved hanging with me. He thought I was hilarious. He started showing me how to connect with Duke and even shared the secret attack commands, which were in German. A German shepherd trained in German. I thought that was hot. And best of all, he was teaching me Kung Fu. That summer, he became a kind of big brother that I never had. Daddy-O ran a crack the same way he ran our house. As a commander, he would yell and rant and curse. We'd all be terrified, walking on eggshells, hoping he wouldn't explode. But Paul was the first person I ever met who wasn't bothered in the least by Daddy-O's anger or outbursts. When Daddy-O would flip, Paul would get totally calm and still, never taking his eyes off Daddy-O. Paul's body language was very clear. You could say anything you want, old man, as long as you say it over there. But if you come over here, 2 words, scorched earth. I was amazed. Paul and Daddy-O got along perfectly. The idea that someone could be confronted by the Daddy-O ogre, stand in the storm of his rage and fury, and disarm him with nothing more than a look and a laugh, I had never experienced that kind of power. Paul's martial arts training allowed him to submit to Daddy-O's authority. He respected him, but he was not afraid of him, because deep down inside, Paul knew that if he needed to, he could kill him. And Daddy-O knew that too. For the first time in my childhood, Paul made me feel safe in my own home. He was powerful. If Paul was around, no one would mess with me. Not the neighborhood kids, not the white boys from school, not even Daddy-O. And just when I thought it was impossible for my cousin to get any cooler, he unlocked the world of hip hop. Back then, hip hop wasn't what it is now. There had been a couple of hits, but for the most part, it was still underground. There were no albums or singles, no radio play, no videos. You had to know somebody who knew somebody who could get you a cassette tape of one of the live performances exploding from the epicenter, New York City. People would literally go stand in the audience at a party and hold up a boombox over their heads to record the performers. That's how mixtapes were created. People physically going to a party and holding a big ass radio up in the air for an hour, 2 hours, then making copies of the tape and giving them to their friends. People in New York would cut a tape of some of their favorite hip hop artists, make a copy, and then take it to their friend in Boston, mail one to their brother in LA, or play one for their little cousin in Philly. These tapes got traded, sold, copied, and traded again. This hand-to-hand exchange across the country was what drove the rocket fuel expansion of hip hop. It was grassroots. It was viral before anyone knew what going viral was. It was straight from the street to the heart. Back in the 1970s in New York City, Black communities would throw block parties. They shut down their block and a DJ, short for disc jockey, would bring out a turntable and a box of records and play on the street for everybody to dance. Given that this was the 1970s, most of what they played was funk and disco music. The songs in both funk and disco always feature instrumental sections somewhere in the middle. The song would be jamming along, and then it would begin to rise until it reached a soaring crescendo with every instrument at full blast, and then boom, nothing but drummer. This became known as the break. Break beats were designed to have a little extra splato to them. The break was the time for performers like James Brown to show off their dance moves. But as it turned out, the breaks became the hottest part of the song and always set the party on fire. Because everybody loved dancing to the break so much, one day at a block party in the Bronx, a guy named DJ Kool Herc came up with the idea to bring out 2 turntables and have 2 of them up to 2 of the same record. That way, he could switch back and forth between them, playing only the break and keeping it going indefinitely. 2 turntables and a mixer also meant that he could blast between James Brown and the Winstons and back to Brown, then Sly and the Family Stone, from break to break to break, only playing the favorite 10 seconds of everybody's favorite records. This created a frenzied new style dance party, and modern DJing was born. Because the DJ now had 2 turntables and a mixer, another innovation emerged: scratching. Scratching was done by moving a record back and forth, creating a wild new sound and music. One of the records could be scratched while the other one played the break. The record being scratched would then be released, perfectly on beat. And then the process was flipped so that the break could continue for as long as people wanted to hear it. Now he's being long-winded, and that's come from that Cancer on the Third. Because I'm like, most people that are into hip hop already know about this whole history of hip hop, and he don't need to explain all that. But moving along, and the only thing that was missing from the equation to make it hip hop was rapping. DJs now had 2 turntables and twice as many records. The demands of the craft consumed more and more of their attention, preventing them from being able to interact with the crowd as much as they used to. So they started bringing their brother or one of their friends along to be on the mic to engage the crowd. These masters of ceremonies would talk to the audience, hype them up, brag about the DJ, and generally entertain the audience. Ladies, let me hear you. Who got $100 in their pocket? Where Brooklyn at? Eventually, the most creative MCs started to talk in rhymes to the rhythm of the break beats, a flavor imported from Jamaican immigrants known as rapping. The block parties began to blaze, especially when the rhymes were clever, funny, poetic, or best of all, when they shouted out your neighborhood. The equation was now complete. DJing and MCing equals hip hop, and the world was not ready. Paul's troublesome escapes to New York City had given him access to all the mixtapes. He knew people who were down with a crew called the Zulu Nation, an early collective of hardcore hip hop enthusiasts based out of the New York, New Jersey area. He could get any tape: Grandmaster Flash, Melly Mel and the Furious Five, the Treacherous Three, Kool Moe Dee battling Busy Bee Starsky, and my all-time favorite, Grandmaster Cass and the Cold Crush Brothers. Grandmaster Cass was single-handedly, undeniably, the greatest influence on my hip-hop life. He was the prototype for the Fresh Prince. He was one of the hip-hop's first storytellers. Cass was witty, he was clever. His verses took you on a journey. You'd be on the edge of your seat listening to him rap, always wondering what was going to happen next. And most of all, my dude knew how to land a punchline. I wanted to be just like Cass. And my first hit single, Girls Ain't Nothing But Trouble, was inspired by, influenced by, basically, I studied every single line of a Grandmaster Cass mixtape freestyle called Yvette, and then wrote my own version of his story. I guess why I connected to him so much was that I had a similar experience with what he describes in Yvette, but it never dawned on me to write a rhyme about it. In a way, Cass validated and unleashed a creative part of me that I never thought anybody would care about. He made it okay to be me. It was a long time ago, but I'll never forget. I got caught in the bed with this girl named Yvette. I was scared like hell, but I got away. That's why I'm talking to you today. I was outside my school shooting up the rock. A crowd of people gathered around listening to my box. It was me, the AI. And then I slipped away to make a phone call. And to this very day, it was a move I regret, but I didn't know it then, so I called Yvette. Grandmaster Cass, Yvette. There's probably no need to point out the similarities, but to gild the proverbial lily, I always loved that Cass was on a basketball court when he makes the call to Yvette. So in the theme song for the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, I put my character on a basketball court too, a quiet homage to the legend. I'm not exactly sure when I became a rapper. Back then, hip hop wasn't something we did. It was what we were. Hip hop was not just our music, it was dance. It was fashion, street art, politics, social justice. It was everything. It was life. It was us. Outsiders didn't see it as a legitimate genre of music to pursue and perfect, but we weren't even thinking about it in those terms. It was something new, fresh, fun, and exciting that was growing around us and within us. None of us thought it was going to blow up and dominate the world like it does today. And if someone had asked, where do you think hip hop will be in 40 years? I probably would have said, oh, it'll be one of the most impactful forms of music in the history of humankind. We simply loved what we were doing, so we kept doing it. I still remember the first rhyme I ever wrote. I was 12 years old. At the age of 1, I had just begun on my journey to the TOP. And at age of 2, everybody knew that I was hellified, MC. At age 3, any short shot could see, I was a bona fide lover at heart. I got an IQ of 142, and like my name, I'm a work of art. Fortunately, I got better. With Paul's tapes and encouragement, I became obsessed. I was already an incessant talker, Gemini rising, and performer, but now I was walking all around all day, quietly babbling and rapping to myself, constructing new rhymes, reciting my favorite verses, trying to freestyle on whatever was going on around me. I went out and bought one of those black and white speckled composition notebooks and started writing down my rhymes and practicing them in my room in the mirror. My fantasy-driven mind, Moon conjoined to Neptune with the moon rule in that 3rd house, but also the fantasy-driven mind can be seen with Mercury opposing Saturn in the 12th. He said, my fantasy-driven mind would splash all over those pages, sometimes even surprising me with what came out. My creative river was raging. Rapping was one of the most natural things in the world to me. And from the cocoon of a bullied, awkward kid emerged a natural-born killer MC. Him using the word cocoon, that's very much Moon conjunct Neptune and Scorpio. Overbrook High School was located less than a mile away from Our Lady of Lourdes, but it may as well have been on another planet. The environments could not have been more different. Whereas Lourdes was bordered the wealthy white neighborhood of Lower Marion, Overbrook was the center of a section called Hilltop, which anchored the poorer Black neighborhoods of West Philadelphia. Our Lady of Lourdes was a small, intimate Catholic school with only a few dozen kids per grade, most of them white. I had been one of the only 3 or 4 Black kids in the entire place, but Overbrook was nicknamed the Castle on the Hill. It was gigantic, an absolute monster of a structure. Built in 1924, back when they used real materials to build buildings, it spanned 2 square city blocks and loomed over the neighborhood like a stone fortress. You had to ascend a mountain of 30 stairs just to make it from the sidewalk to the front door. And if you survived the climb, what you found inside was nearly 1,200 students, 99% of them Black. Swarms of kids buzzed through the city block-long hallways. At Lourdes, everyone had known who I was, but when I walked into Overbrook on my first day, I was completely anonymous. I was intimidated and terrified. As I look back with today's understanding, I was probably on the edge of a panic attack. My heart was racing, my hands were shaking, but by this time I had developed an infallible strategy for coping with my fear: performance. If I could get them laughing and smiling, then I would feel safe. I'm still not exactly sure why I did what I did that first day. It was a reflex, some bizarre automatic defense mechanism, as though my emotional immune system had kicked in and took control of my mouth. I was talking before I knew what I was going to say, and thereby started my high school career with maybe the stupidest thing I had ever done in my life up to that point. Just before 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, a couple of hundred kids gathered in the sprawling cafeteria for orientation. We were the new kids, there to get acclimated, to get our class assignments, and to be officially welcomed to Overbrook High School. As I entered the cafeteria, the mounting pressure of my anxiety finally became too much. I put my hands up into the air and shouted, excuse me, may I have everybody's attention, please? The room quieted. 200 students all turned and looked at me. Excuse me. He's here, I said, pointing to myself. Y'all can relax because he's here. You're welcome. Go ahead to what y'all doing. I'll be here if y'all need me. There was a strange silence, clearly. This was an educational first for most of the kids. A couple of them chuckled. Then most of them just went back to what they were doing before they were so bizarrely interrupted. I'm not sure what response I had hoped for from the crowd. but the outburst had at least purged most of my anxiety and tension. As I ventured deeper into the room, I slid past a dude who had clearly not been impressed by my announcement. Without looking up, he said, "Man, don't nobody give a fuck that you're here." Without missing a beat, I leaned down to him and said, "Hey, just give me 10 minutes. Your girl gonna care." Ooh, the voices around us rang out. There were even a couple of claps. The kid looked at me for a second, but didn't say a word. He gave this stiff chin nod. Not a nod of agreement, but a nod of, all right, so that's how it's going to be. I moved on victoriously, thinking maybe this high school thing ain't going to be so bad. At 8:31, orientation was complete, and the students were released into the overbook halls to juke and fumble and stumble around until we located our homeroom classes. My homeroom was 315, and I was rounding the stairs between the second and third floors. I saw the dude from the lunchroom out of the corner of my eye, sneaking up behind me. Then there was a blue flash, a sharp pain to the right side of my head, and then nothing. The next thing I remember is the taste of blood, then a clamor of voices. My top lip is swollen, and my front teeth are loose. And I had the worst headache I've ever had. This guy had taken one of those old school combination locks, the kind that everybody used for their lockers. He put the lock in the palm of his hand and the steel loop over his middle finger, creating a makeshift form of brass knuckles. As he passed, he cracked me on the right side of my head with the lock. I went down instantly. As I fell, I hit my mouth on the stairs. Blood everywhere, kids screaming, teachers running, everybody trying to figure out if I had died or not. Now that right there, that's a product of that Aries North Node, but also Saturn and Aries, Chiron, Aries. Aries, deals with the head. And if you have a planet in Aries, especially like Saturn or Mars, Chiron, even the Aries North Node, you could end up with a head injury. You could end up getting hit upside the head. And again, him having to be more willing to defend himself is very much part of that Aries North Node landscape. The lights in the principal's office are killing my eyes. I'm holding a towel over my mouth as Daddy-O walks in. Pretty soon the police are there, and I mumble through my recollection. Daddy-O is furious. The police are talking to the principal about pressing charges. In my haze, all I can think is, wait, everybody slow down. This is all happening too fast. I just wanted to hit pause and then rewind. I wanted a do-over. I didn't want to be here. I didn't want any of this to be the truth. Come on, Daddy-O said, let's go. He stands me up. The hallways are empty now. Daddy-O feels like a lion that can't find anything to kill. We exit the side door. I'd only been at Overbrook for an hour and a half. It's weird to be out of school in the middle of the day. The Sugar Bowl convenience store is across the street. I wanted a water ice and a pretzel. It just seemed like Daddy-O wasn't in the mood, so I didn't ask. As we drove away, I saw the kid being led in handcuffs for the first day of high school and discarded into the back of a paddy wagon. He was later expelled, and I never even knew his name. Night. The moonlight glints off my swollen, Vaseline-caked lips. The first moment of solace in a day of complete and utter insanity. As I lay in my bed on my left side, I wonder, what the hell happened? How did I get here? Just then, Gigi came in to check on me. She changed out my ice pack, plumped up my pillow, and reset the bandage on my head. I gotta say, it's not too bad having a nurse for a grandmother. I told her the whole story. She didn't lecture or scold. She simply said, if you stop talking so much, maybe you could see some of those hits coming. Then she kissed me and went on her way. I couldn't stop thinking about Gigi's words. She was right. I was always talking, always joking. I never shut up. I talked not because I had anything particularly important to say, but because I was afraid. It began to dawn on me that my overcompensation and fake bravado were really just another more insidious manifestation of the coward. My thoughts were swirling. My mind drifted to the time when Gigi found my first rap book. Like most young kids emulating their hip hop idols, I had been writing verses full of curse words and slick, slangy vulgarities, and I had accidentally left my book out in the kitchen. Gigi found it and read it. She never said anything to me, but she wrote me a note on the inside front cover. Dear Willard, truly intelligent people do not have to use language like this to express themselves. God has blessed you with the gift of words. Be sure you are using your gifts to uplift others. Please show the world you are intelligent as we think you are. Love, Gigi. Laying in my bed, I was overcome with shame. Had I used my words to uplift others? I thought about this kid sitting in a jail cell somewhere. What is his grandmother doing right now? He had potentially thrown his whole life away. A demise maybe not caused, but certainly provoked by my words. I knew for certain I didn't want to be that kind of person. But my shame slowly began to give way to a staggering realization of the power of words. I knew that I had unconsciously caused my whole day. I didn't know exactly how, but I knew for damn sure I had done it. I sensed for the first time that I wasn't weak. In fact, I was infinitely powerful. I just had no control over it. My imagination was running wild with the possibilities. God had indeed blessed me with the gift of words, and that night, I was getting my first glimpse of the power of those words to alter and shape my reality. And then I asked myself, if I have this much power, shouldn't I use it for good? Words can affect how people view themselves, how they treat each other, how they navigate the world. Words can build people up or they can tear them down. I decided that night that I wanted to use my words to empower others, to help rather than hurt. I never cursed again in my rhymes, and I got criticized and smashed for years for that choice. But there was no peer pressure that even came close to overriding Gigi's pressure. Those first months of high school were a little rocky, but I was certainly no longer anonymous. And in the same way that the power of my words had almost destroyed me, I was now starting to see their power painting my dreams. But the middle of that school year, hip hop had already started to bubble in Philly. And now everyone had their own cousin, Paul, somebody they knew in New York who could get them mixtapes. The success of Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang was putting major dents into mainstream barriers. Everybody was listening to that song all the time. Walking the halls of Overbrook that year was like walking through a hip hop battleground. Hip hop may not have been on TV, it may not have been on the radio, but at Overbrook High, everybody was rapping. Nobody knew it yet, but I had been writing rhymes every day for the past 8 months. I had pages and pages of different concepts and punchlines and stories. I started to keep a stash memorized and ready to go. I would walk up on groups of kids rapping and join in. And I started slowly to develop a reputation as a pretty good rapper. The new thing was freestyling. Somebody would beatbox with their mouth, and then the rapper would improvise in the moment about whatever was around them. Some kid's funny shoes, the test you failed in math class, the girl you liked, whatever. This was always my biggest strength. I had been cracking jokes my entire life. Now all I had to do was make them rhyme and people were flipping. The best beatboxer in the whole school was a guy named Clarence Holmes. Everybody called him Clay. Now, not only could he generate the most bass, but he could mimic the actual sounds of popular breakbeats. And on top of that, Clay could do sound effects. He could make a bird noise in the hallway that was so realistic, people would be turning around to see who let the bird in here. I soon realized that every time Clay beatboxed for me, he always made me sound better. I started seeking him out every day after class. I roll up and hit him with our standard greeting. Sup, C, you ready to rock? You know what it is, he'd say. Clay was always ready to rock, always. So much so that we all started calling him Ready Rock C. Pretty soon, what started out as just casual freestyle sessions, rhyming and flowing and trying to one-up each other, morphed into what became known as battles. I would step up and do a verse, then the other kid would try to one-up me. Maybe he'd make fun of my hair or my clothes. Then when his verse finished, I had to step back in and freestyle a response. The judge of who won was determined mainly by who got the biggest laugh or cheer from the crowd. If you won the crowd, you won the battle. I was invisible. 2 words, scorched earth. There were some guys who were clever than me, who had tighter flows or better voices or more developed poetic sense, but nobody was as funny as me. Nobody could rock the crowd with a punchline the way I did. What nobody seemed to ever understand was that you can't beat funny. You can spit all the tough gangster shit you want. You can rip rhymes about all the money and the women in the world. But if your pants are just a little bit too far above your knees and somebody says, "Look at you, homie, pretending you all fly. Looks like your shoes went to a party and your pants got high," and 40 people laugh, you're done. It's over. Rapping changed everything for me. For the first time in my life, I was popular. I was getting attention and respect. Ready Rock and I were from Winfield, but Overbrook was in Hilltop. Many times in those battles, we'd be repping for Winfield. So a lot of the same neighborhood guys who used to pick on me and make fun of me were now getting hyped when I showed up. I was making new friends. Girls were starting to feel me. Ready Rock and I became inseparable. The other reason I never lost a rap battle was because I had been raised in the house of Daddy-O, molded and chiseled by his unrelenting work ethic. I practiced incessantly. Unlike the other kids who were starting to smoke weed and cut class, I spent hours and hours filling notebooks with rhymes every day. I'd stand in the mirror and practice my verses, making sure my face and my body language were perfectly matched to reinforce and punctuate the punchlines. I was tightening my delivery and trying to deepen my tone. Every break between class and before and after school, I was always looking for some sucker who was slipping. I battled anybody in the lunchroom, in the parking lot, at the Tustin playground, or the Beaver schoolyard. In class, I started having fun with my teachers, rhyming answers back when they called on me. I'd rhyme to my parents. I answered the phones in rhymes. A lot of adults pretended they hated it, but I knew they loved it. And again, that's that moon conjunct Neptune, Neptune's influence upon that moon with the moon ruling the third house. The combination of hip hop and humor made me untouchable. I had found my voice. I was choosing my words poetically and comically. And now for the first time, I was experiencing a surge of power over my own life. My teachers loved me. I'd be late for class or miss homework or get caught being silly in the back of the room. They couldn't yell at me because they were laughing. I started noticing that I was never getting into trouble. One of my favorite teachers was Miss Brown. She taught algebra too, elementary functions, and trig. She had flawless chocolate skin and big, steady brown eyes. Her body was just under 5 feet tall, but she was 6'8" on the inside. She knew exactly what I was doing. By this point, I was at least a foot taller than her. And when I would do something that she needed to check me for, she walked right up into my chest and say, "Come down here so I could talk to you." Learning is really easy when you can feel that your teachers love you. Miss Brown began to jokingly call me Prince Charming. She sarcastically saying things like, "Oh, look, Prince Charming has graced us with his homework this Monday morning. How kind of him." The kids would laugh and I would eat it up. As long as everybody's laughing, I'm good. Now, as you can see, so far, Will Smith has this strong need for attention. And all of that energy in the fifth house is basically representing that, especially that fifth house sun. So he really has this strong need for attention, almost like it's a drug to him. The kids would laugh and I would eat it up. As long as everybody's laughing, I'm good. Back in the 80s, the word fresh was the new hip hop slang. Everybody was saying it every other word, like fly in the 70s or dope in the 90s. In the 80s, if something was hot, you'd say, "Man, that's fresh." One day I came running into Miss Brown's class, literally only 45 seconds after the bell. And looking at her watch, she said, "His Highness, the Prince, 2 minutes late." I quickly corrected her. "Nah, Miss Brown, we both know I am barely 30 seconds late. And if you don't mind, thenceforth and hitherto, do I demand to be known as the Fresh Prince." The classroom burst out laughing. The name stuck. In order to feel confident and secure, you need to have something to feel confident and secure about. We all want to feel good about ourselves, but many of us don't recognize how much work that actually takes. Internal power and confidence are born of insight and proficiency. When you understand something or you're good at something, you feel strong. It makes you feel like you have something to offer. When you have adequately cultivated your unique skills and gifts, then you're excited about approaching and interacting with the world. And what I learned from Paul was that being good at something allows you to be calm in a storm, knowing that you can handle whatever comes. There is a great Bruce Lee quote that resonates with me. One of Lee's students once asked him, "Master, you constantly speak of peace. Yet every day you train us to fight. How do you reconcile these conflicting ideas?" And Bruce Lee responded, "It is better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war." Rapping didn't just win me the approval I desperately craved from my peers. It gave me a sense of power, that approval from his peers coming from his Mercury conjoined to Venus and Libra, but just him being a Libra, period. But I knew it was fleeting. It demanded my consistent attention and nurturing. I knew I was good, but I also knew that I had to work. I wasn't going to just come to me, or it wasn't just going to come to me. I had to go get it. This chapter, I'm not really feeling, and it's a hard read because it's like the way he's writing it. Let me see how many pages I got left because I'm actually quite bored with this chapter. Okay, I don't know how many pages to go, but he better start saying something more interesting before I just totally just shut this chapter down. He said, "I kept seeing her in the hallways. I'd even have a dream about her, but we were from two different cliques. I was rapping now, so I was rolling with the cool kids, but she wore big ass glasses, and her and all her friends were in the art program and lugged around these big ass portfolio bags. But Melanie Parker was beautiful. She noticed me soon after the unfortunate lock incident. She was a mochaccino flavored cutie. She had that sort of goofy, gorgeous genius thing, a beguiling mixture of insecurity and quirkiness surrounding a simmering core of artistic brilliance. We had been sniffing around each other for a few weeks, and I could tell she was far too much of a lady to speak first. She had gorgeous mahogany eyes and a springtime smile that I would come to understand was painted on top of hidden layers of sadness. Melanie was a broken angel, and from the moment I saw her, I wanted nothing more than to take care of her. That's his moon conjoined Neptune, him wanting to rescue women and take care of them. "What's up, cutie? I'm the prince," I said. She smiled politely and said, "What does your mother call you?" I was thinking, damn, my mother calls me by my government name. "Well, she calls me Willard," I said. "But you can call me..." "Willard," she interrupted. "Nice to meet you, Willard. I'm Melanie." She never called me Will. She never called me Prince. She called me asshole once or twice, but to this day, she calls me Willard. "Look, that's a big ass art bag," I said. "May I carry it for you to your next class?" Melanie paused. I sensed that she already liked me, but she felt like she had to make it difficult. She handed me the bag without a word and walked off to class. I followed her, already completely in love. When we reached her classroom, I handed her the bag. "I think you should let me carry it home for you this afternoon," I said. "You should rest your art muscles." I will walk Melanie home from Overbrook every day. She took easily to wonder and awe. Everything was interesting to her. She was one of those people who could stop and look at a tree for 10 minutes. Melanie lived in the opposite direction from Woodcrest, so I walked 10 minutes to her house, carrying her big ass portfolio all the way, then 20 minutes back to mine, thinking about those eyes all the way home. Melanie was born and raised in Minneapolis. Her household was filled with violence to a tragic extreme. Her mother ended up killing her father and went to prison for it. Her mother incarcerated. Melanie moved to Philly to live with her aunt, a strict Muslim who opened her home to her niece, but who had maintained very strict opinions about how a teenage girl should behave. I never quite got the whole story, but on one occasion, Melanie and her aunt had a very serious disagreement about something, which escalated to the point that her aunt threw Melanie out of the house. Legally, without a place to stay, Melanie could have been sent back to Minneapolis and placed into foster care. I was panic stricken. I told my mom the whole story and she begged her to let Melanie stay with us. "Mom, It'll only be for a little while, I said. I'll get a job, do whatever I have to do to get a bunch of money. And me and Melanie will get our own place. I love her, Mommy. Please, can she stay with us till I can figure it out? My mom's eyes welled, her tears, a complex emotional mixture. On the one hand, this was exactly the kind of son she had hoped to raise, loving, responsible, committed. But on the other hand, she knew from personal experience the fragile realities of young love. Oh, hell no, Daddy-O said. Carlin, you know exactly what they gonna be doing? But I had already promised my mother, no sex. Melanie would stay in the basement. I would sleep in my room 2 floors up. It was only temporary. Daddy-O protested, but my mom won this one. I'm still not exactly sure why I did what I did that night. To this day, I have no idea what I was thinking. Of all the experiences I am sharing in this book, this is the individual moment of personal behavior that makes the least sense to me. Before I reveal what happened, I would like to preface my remarks by making it unequivocally clear that I was deeply and totally in love with Melanie Parker. We were going to be married. We were going to have 4 beautiful mochaccino flavored children, and our union would live alongside the epic tales of romance. Romeo and Juliet, Tristan and ICU, Tupac and Janet, even Eddie and Hallie and Boomerang. But at 4 a.m., less than 3 months into our star-crossed love affair, my mom should have been asleep, but tragically decided she wanted a cup of coffee. And wearing slippers far too quiet to defend her delicate sensibilities, she approached the threshold of the family kitchen. Still innocent, she flipped the light switch, as she had done tens of thousands of times before. But this time her eyes landed upon her eldest son and his girlfriend deep in the throes of reckless lovemaking. As a teenager outside of physical injury, you cannot feel worse than having your mother catch you and your girlfriend doggy style on her kitchen floor. Oh, Willard, Mama growled, slapping the lights off, stomping furiously up the stairs, then slamming of her bedroom door functioned as a disastrous exclamation point. Now she wants to make noise. By the grace of God, those few days at Woodcrest allowed Melanie's aunt to calm down and let her move back in. I was only 16, but I was all in. I was determined more than ever to get us our own plates so Melanie and I could build a life together. I had gotten my driver's permit just before my 16th birthday. Reddy Rock and I loved to drive around West Philly after school every day, looking for people to battle. They were pretty easy to find back then. It would be a bunch of dudes standing on a corner in a circle, one of them with their hands cupped around their mouth, bopping their head back and forth, the universal human beatboxing posture. We pull the car over, step out, strike the b-boy stance, and it was on. It didn't take but a moment for me to start schooling fools. I'm dropping punchlines, people waving and screaming, "Oh shit, you heard what he said?" The smart guys just quit when they realized I had won the crowd. Because once the crowd is against you, anything you say just makes you look stupider. But some suckers didn't. They would try to keep going, and then 2 words, scorched earth. By my junior year, I had developed a reputation around West Philly. I joined a crew of slightly older guys. We called ourselves the Hypnotic MCs. The design of the group was based on Grandmaster Cass and the Cold Crush Brothers. We had a DJ and 4 MCs. DJ Groove on the tables, Jamie Fresh, Shaky D, my friend Mark Forrest, aka the Lord Supreme, and me, the Fresh Prince. Reddy Rock would pop in and out, but he wasn't really feeling these dudes. I took my role in the Hypnotic MCs very seriously. I attacked it with the discipline Daddy-O had instilled in me. But back then, I hadn't learned yet that most people didn't have the same work ethic as me. I wanted to rehearse every day on a specific schedule. They were looking at it more casually. Sometimes they would show up late to rehearsal, and other times not at all. I wanted us to perform at all the block parties and pool our money to buy equipment, pass out flyers to advertise ourselves, create our own cassettes. Because I was the youngest, they always kind of laughed at me and dismissed my ideas. I didn't finally convince everybody to put up $200 a piece, so we could purchase the brand new SB12 sampling beatbox. I dug in for a few weeks at the Ice House and came up with my share. We now had a beatbox, 4 microphones, 2 turntables, and all the records we'd ever need. Because Groove was the DJ, we agreed to keep all the equipment at his house. We did a handful of pretty good shows together over about 6-month period, but mostly the equipment just sat there in Groove's basement unused. I was getting frustrated. Nobody wanted to grind and go get it. My work ethic and constant pushing slowly drove a wedge between me and the group. They resented me for always bugging them and ruining what to them was supposed to be a fun hobby. That's his Mars and Virgo, being a big nag and wanting to be on this set schedule and all this stuff. I resented them for not putting forth the effort to make this thing as good as it possibly could be. I remember being at rehearsals with them and finding myself barking at Daddy-O's axiom. 99% is the same as 0. We started having arguments and fighting over everything, over lines, over which break beats were the best with the harmony, over who would take the verse. Every decision became a chore. Knowing what I know now, I could see that there was no way it could have worked. But back then, my mind was set that everything could be fixed. Mars and Virgo. But finally, after months of no progress, no recording anything, I went to Groove's house and told the guys that I was out. To them, I was the obnoxious kid who was killing everybody's vibe anyway. They sort of shrugged, shared a laugh between themselves, and threw me deuces. So I grabbed my mic and my headphones, and in the honor of fairness, I offered to buy the SB12 back for them. It's not for sale, Groove said. There was a new coldness in his voice. Come on, man. Y'all not even using that thing, I said. My dad will help me with the cash. They just ignored me and kept talking among themselves. It wasn't about the SB12. It wasn't even about resentment. It was about power. They were disrespecting me because they could. They knew I couldn't do anything. All right, fine, I said. Just give me my $200 and y'all can keep it. They all kind of smirked at one another, and then Groove said, nope, no argument. Nobody raised their voice, just no after no. Outwardly, I stayed cool, but a fury was beginning to churn inside me. I had suffered bullying, abuse in my home, and all through my childhood, and I was sick of that shit. Okay, I said calmly, I'll see y'all later. But as I started to leave, I realized that the SB12 was sitting right there. So I walked over to it, I paused, then I snatched it up, violently ripping the cables from the wall, held it high over my head with the knobs facing down, and crashed. I slammed it down onto the concrete basement floor. That thing disintegrated, knobs, plastic, transistors spraying everywhere. What the fuck are y'all doing? Groove screamed. And then I hauled ass up the basement stairs and out into the street. They were right on me in the beginning, but I was the young one. Back in the day, how I was running was known as booking. I put my head down and didn't look back for 8 blocks. When I finally slowed down, there was no one behind me. I was on my own now. That was very Scorpio moon in him. All of the windows were broken out of Daddy-O's brand new Chevy van. The radio and all his tools were gone. Paul had the van when it happened, and he was almost in tears apologizing to Daddy-O. Daddy-O was trying to calm him down. That shit happened, man. That's why we have insurance, Daddy-O said. But something about Paul's inner code made this unforgivable. He felt like the van was in his possession and he had been entrusted with it. I had never seen him like this. Paul felt like he had somehow failed and dishonored Daddy-O. Daddy-O could see that thing rising up in Paul, the thing that led him to being in West Philly in the first place. Hey, Paul, look at me. You know how many times niggas done broke in and stole my shit? I know exactly who did it, Uncle Will, Paul said. Fuck them niggas, Paul. We got too much shit to do. Leave it alone. But Paul couldn't let it go. He was messing with a girl named Shelly, who used to mess with this old head named Black. Black ran Winfield. He was always on the corner in front of Mr. Bryan's store with 7 or 8 of his friends. Black was about 6'4" and always had his shirt off. He didn't give a fuck. He would smoke weed outside in the daytime. Paul walked into the middle of the crowd, right up to Black. Did you touch my uncle's van? Paul said. Everybody in the corner laughed. Yeah, I did it. What you gonna do about it? Bloop. Within a couple of seconds, Black's nose was broken, but he didn't know yet. He wouldn't find out until later when he regained consciousness. I never seen a fight like this except in the movies. Paul beat up everybody. Every dude on the corner either bleeding, running away, or asleep. Paul didn't come home that night or the next. He had disobeyed Daddy-O. I guess that was too much for him to bear. It would be 25 years before I saw him again. And that's the end of chapter 4. That was a hard read because it was tedious. It was too long, in my opinion, too detailed about like some parts of his early life that really are irrelevant, in my opinion. Yeah, I really wasn't digging chapter 3 or chapter 4. So now I'm like really questioning how chapter 5 is going to be. Chapter 5 is called Hope. I hope chapter 5 is more interesting than chapter 3 and 4 because I wasn't too impressed. And yeah, he really like killed my momentum with the reading. That's why I was like, kind of stumbling over my words and stuff. I just wasn't into it. Y'all let me know what y'all think with this whole situation. Because I wasn't feeling it. Now, again, Will has this issue with attention. It's like he wants attention at all costs. And that's very much dealing with that stellium in the 5th house. He has Virgo in the 5th house, and then he has that Mercury ruler of the 5th conjoined to conjoined to Venus and Libra. And that can make him really be about seeking attention and validation from others to the point where it does become like something that's necessary as like having to take medication. But yeah, I just wasn't feeling chapter 4. I was actually quite bored. He goes into too many details about like some of the early parts of his life, like when people are waiting for him to get to the nitty gritty, like stuff about the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and all that. I hope he goes into detail when it comes to like his adult life, like he's doing with his childhood. But yeah, that's chapter 4. I'm hoping chapter 5 will be much better. So stay tuned for that. I actually feel like taking a nap now. But yeah, so if you would like a reading, you could go to my website. The link is in the description. And please like and share, subscribe if you're new to this channel, and I'll be back soon.